Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the It's the Pictures podcast. This is episode 171, and I am your host, Max Colville. And joining me now is the co hostess with the mostest, Evan Crean. Hi, Evan.
Hey Max, good to be here as always.
Yeah, it's a great weekend here in the upper states. Where up in New England, we've had some terrific weather, and I feel saying these terrific weather reports, Evan. I almost feel like David Lynch, and he dropped a hint that he might have a project coming out, but some people were joking that maybe it's just going to be like a commercial, knowing David Lynch. So we'll see.
You never know with David Lynch. He keeps it interesting.
But in other news, we have a special guest this week. We are joined by Odie Henderson. Hello, Odie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, Odie, can you share a little bit about yourself and where you write, and maybe a little bit about your new novel?
Well, I like sunshine and rainbows and walking on the beach. No, I am Odie Henderson. I am the film critic of the Boston Globe at this moment. I am also the author of the new book, Black Caesars and Foxy Cleopatras, A History of Blaxploitation Cinema. I'm here in New Jersey. You guys are up in New England. We've had some great weather here too. And I'm looking forward to getting into our discussion today.
Yes, our discussion this week is on Richard Linklater, celebrating his new film Hitman, which is now in limited release and opening. Well, not opening, but appearing on streaming June 7th on Netflix. So it's probably, yeah, I think it's one of Netflix's biggest original movies of this year, even though like Netflix is terrible at promoting their movies. So it's just so funny, but like this one seems like a real home run, and maybe I'm showing my hand a little bit because all three of us have seen the movie, and we'll be talking about it. But yeah, I think they have a real winner here if they were smart about it. But yeah, that's Netflix.
They're never smart about it. I mean, look at Knives Out. Knives Out, people are begging for it to stay in the theater and Netflix pulled it. Netflix owns the Paris here in New York, and they own the Egyptian in Los Angeles, as I discovered when I was at TCM Festival earlier this year. So they've run it. Netflix will show all of its movies at the theaters that they own. And they're nice theaters. The Egyptian's very nice. The Paris is very nice. They're both very old theaters. And, the problem I have with Netflix and with Amazon and with a lot of, even with Warner Brothers, is that they don't give movies the opportunity to have legs. I know we'll talk a little bit later about box office, but sometimes a movie needs some time to find an audience. And the funny thing is that everybody
Yep.
I've talked to has seen this movie in the theater, has gone to a packed house, a packed and very enthusiastic house. So, I saw this at TIFF. So, the second time I saw it, they sent me a screener, but I saw it in the theater at TIFF, and it played like gangbusters.
Yeah, I can imagine it would. And unfortunately, the only experience that I had with watching Hitman was through a screener as well. And I feel kind of like I missed out on these big celebrations in the theater because I've heard that it has played at gangbusters, not only here at TIFF, but at other festivals that it played at. Yeah, as you alluded to, we're going to start with our news section and talk a little bit about box office woes, if you will. As much as the three of us care, I guess, not it depends. The box office has been pretty dismal. Memorial Day weekend with Furiosa and Garfield leading the way was the worst in 3 decades. Now we're a week removed from that, and there wasn't a new release blockbuster in sight. And this weekend also was pretty dismal at the box office. Evan, I guess like our box office game here is really gonna just be dependent on June and July movies, huh?
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see how it turns out. That's for sure. I mean, Max, you're already kicking my ass anyway, but I guess we'll guess we'll see what happens. It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a very unusual year.
It seems like the Planet of the Apes movie is dealing with like some staying power here now, and it's like third weekend. I think it was still number 4 at the box office. Odie, you mentioned something about like these movies having or needing legs. We saw last year of Barbenheimer how long the Warner Brothers and Universal kept those films in theaters and how successful that was. I saw earlier today that Disney plans on keeping Inside Out 2 in theaters for at least 100 days. And what's your opinion on these movies being able to leg it out a little?
Well, there's a movie that I love called The Fall Guy, which I gave 3.5 stars to in the paper. It surprised me because I'm not a fan of Ryan Gosling. Barbie accepted, and a couple of other films accepted. And I
Mhm.
did watch The Fall Guy when I was a kid on television, but it just seemed like, here we go, this is another Bewitched, and it turned out to be a great movie that, you know, would have staying power because, again, I've talked to people and people have gone to see it and they've loved it. And they said the audience loved it and they were cheering and clapping. I don't, as the film critic, I rarely do I get to go to a public screening. Sometimes I do, but it's a public screening with the critics. Normally, I just go to the critic screening, so I miss Nicole Kidman and her stupid ass ad and all the trailers. So I don't really get a good audience. I get critics, and we never respond to anything. We never react. So I mean, I wish that they would let movies stay out in the theaters a little while. They've got enough theaters for this. I mean, I'm going to see Bad Boys Ride or Die tomorrow, and it's at a theater that's got 17 theaters in it. I'm sure they could keep a couple of movies in there for a little while. So I wish they did. I mean, I miss those days where you could catch something on the third or fourth week. A lot of people don't want to go opening weekend because that's when you get the teenagers and the people on their phones. People want to go on a Tuesday at 11 o'clock when there's nobody there but the old people.
Mhm.
And I wish that they had more. I hate the fact that, and this has been going on for a while, that the box office first weekend is make or break. You get that one weekend. If you don't make money, you're screwed. And I really don't think that every movie that comes out is an automatic home run. I think sometimes it needs word of mouth. People underestimate word of mouth because we got Twitter and all these other social media things. But I think people would trust a friend that said, go see this, as opposed to some asshole on Twitter telling you to go see it. So I miss those days, and I wish that the studios had more faith in that. But the box office studios are basically cutting their own throats in this fashion. It's their fault.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes you get lucky as far as some of these studios do, and they kind of let these films breathe a little bit, and they in turn see rewards for it. One movie that I watched just the other night because I had nothing better to do on Netflix was the Glenn Powell Anyone But You, and that movie is a really great example of a movie that Sony let sit in theaters for a little bit over the holidays and went to February and it made some pretty good money. So
It got legs. People talked about it. I don't know what they were talking about. I thought it was dreadful, but regardless of what I think, it had legs because they let it sit out there for a little while, and people started to talk about it, and people started to go see it. People, brought a friend or they told a friend, and I think again, this is underestimated by the studios and even by the theaters.
yeah, Evan, do you have anything else to add about on this topic?
I completely agree. I think Odie, you raised a great point about the need to kind of let some of these movies linger in theaters for longer to get that opportunity to build a word of mouth. Because you're right, even with social media, I mean, and including social media, I mean, people pay attention to what their friends are saying on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, and so there are opportunities to find a following, find an audience if you just kind of are a little bit more patient and not so ready to throw up your hands after opening weekend like everyone seems to be doing. And great examples last year, like you guys said, but Barbie and Oppenheimer, kind of letting those movies stick around. They were already doing well, but they did even better because they had a chance, to be out there, to get word of mouth, for people to like make a whole event of going to see them. And yeah, and Anyone But You, another great example, like you said, Max. They let it kind of sit there, and then it actually built up an audience and made some money. So I think it seems like the name of the game with the studios is the need to be a little bit more patient with some of their movies. I mean, some are just bad. They know they're going to be bad. You know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah,
certain horror movies
it
and
doesn't need to be
things.
out for 6 months.
Yeah, but I think if you're putting a movie out there like The Fall Guy, and you're like, I'm pretty confident this is actually a decent movie, but maybe just needs a minute to find an audience. Be patient on something like that, and maybe not when you've got some some horror movie 3, 4, however many installments, that's not doing well. Okay, that's probably not gonna suddenly find an audience.
Yeah, right. Those kind of have built-in audiences, and if not, they go home. In memory of our episodes that we used to do, where we very vigorously follow the results of the Cannes Film Festival. I feel like those days are far behind the It's the Pictures podcast, because frequently we don't get to see those movies for quite some time, and not only us but even the public. They might not even see these movies to next February, knowing how some of these studios play awards games and what have you. But I guess the most notable award went to Sean Baker and his new film Honora, which has distribution through Neon. Um, Sean Baker is the director of Rex Rocket, or was it Red Rocket? I'm not sure.
Yeah, Red
Um,
Rocket.
It's red.
yeah, Red, and Tangerine, which is the one that I really like from him, and the Florida Project. So his film won the Palme d'Or, the big award from the Cannes Film Festival. Evan, were you watching any of the results, or did you hear about this?
Yeah, I heard about the movie. I was following along the Cannes Film Festival, reading Variety's coverage of it throughout the festival, and I'd read some reviews of the film, and it sounds really interesting. And if nothing else, Sean Baker definitely likes to dig into kind of like meaty subjects. We know he likes looking at class. He likes looking and commenting on sex work and sex work being real work. And so I'm very interested to see this movie at some point based on what I've heard about it. It sounds like a fascinating story. It sounds juicy in terms of the drama in the movie, and so yeah, I was surprised actually that it won the Palme d'Or, because it wasn't striking me as one of the top, contenders for it. But it's cool. It's cool that it won.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that Neon has this feeling where they want to license or like distribute the Palme d'Or winner, because they've done it now for the last few years. It might be trouble to get more awards traction for it, and I think that's what they plan on, so that they can get more eyes on it. Due to it being an English language film now, it's not going to be have that international language option to like kind of give it some extra oomph. Odie, do you pay much attention to the Cannes Film Festival?
Well, the paper doesn't allow me to cover it, but I do. I mean, I know people who go there every year from RogerEbert.com. I'm always jealous they get to go. And when I was in England for my birthday last month, one of my friends said he predicted that Sean Baker was going to win the Palme d'Or, and I was like, I don't know about that. I figured it was going to go. They wanted to give it to like maybe Andrew Arnold's Bird, and they would give Megalopolis something because it's the 45th anniversary of Apocalypse Now winning the Palme d'Or, the 50th anniversary of The Conversation winning the Palme d'Or, and Coppola was there and all that nonsense and jazz. And I thought that maybe Baker might get the actress award because I'd heard the performance was really, really good in this film, and that would be it. And that either that Bird and Megalopolis was split. Either one would get the Palme d'Or and one would get director. Of course, I was wrong. I should have taken my friend's advice. He'd been to mini Cannes. I've never been to Cannes, the festival. I've been to Cannes, the town, once. Uh, so I was not surprised that it won simply because I had a heads up that might win. I just didn't know that it could beat Megalopolis or some of the other films that were a big deal over there.
Yeah, I think there was one film which its name forgets me, but it had just like a crazy story where like the director had to flee his country in order to get the film there.
Right, and I think that won either the Grand Prix or the runner-up award, which I never remember the name of it. It did win something. I know that because they have pictures of the director, holding up the award. It may have been the runner-up prize, the jury prize, right? I think that's what it's called when it's the second
Yeah,
place.
yeah, I think the third prize is the jury prize, and then
Okay, so the Grand Prix is the second prize then.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was a interesting story, and yeah, it's always fun to hear what's coming out of there, whether or not it's studios to try to take a big swing on their blockbusters. Of course, something like Furiosa got good waves this year, whereas last year they tried to do Dial of Destiny, and that crashed and burned that idea. And then uh So it could either be a platform to really launch a film or really sink a film pretty quickly. If it's, I guess there was a Sean Penn movie a few years back that played there and it like got decimated and
Oh
like
yeah,
watch it.
he's got a new movie coming out where he's driving a cab and Dakota Johnson is his passenger.
Yeah, is it like Daddy-O or something like
Daddy
that?
is what it's called. Yeah, the movie I'm interested in seeing from Cannes is the Demi Moore movie. The what's it called? The Substance.
Yeah, I think that's it.
And it's directed by the woman who did Revenge, but it's I jokingly said it returns Demi Moore to her rightful place as the star of movies like Parasite, and not the Parasite that won all those Oscars, the 1981 3D Parasite that I snuck into because it was rated R. So it's nice to see Demi doing genre work, and I hear it's even if it's not good, I hear it's really gory. So I'm down.
All right. And then the third thing I wanted to cover with the news section here is Ryan Johnson, director of the Knives Out films, Knives Out and Glass Onion, announced that production is in full swing for the next entry in the Knives Out franchise, and now entitled Wake Up Dead Man. And he showcased, well, he didn't showcase it, he kind of the studio leaked through the trades that all these new actors were signing up to be part of the movie. Actors from Jeremy Renner to Mila Kunis and others. And yeah, it was just like the big.
And Glenn Close too, right?
What was that? Yeah, Glenn Close as well. Yep. And then they
Kerry
had
Washington.
yeah, and Kaylee Spaney from Civil War and Priscilla, I think. So.
Hmm.
I hope they kill her. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't like either of those movies. I hated Priscilla, as the newspaper review mentioned. That some woman who was a crazed Elvis fan wanted me to come on her podcast to argue the merits of Priscilla. And I'm like, lady, do you know who I am? Like, my mother would not let us allow us to watch Elvis movies in the house. My mother hated Elvis and John Wayne. I think she hated them worse than she hated Nixon. And that should tell
Wow.
you something.
Yeah, so what do you think, Odie? This is just general like get everyone hyped up, make big noise, or
I loved Knives Out. I loved Glass Onion even more. They both on my 10 best list those years. He can make a million more of those movies. I will go see them. I love them, and
Hmm.
hopefully this is not his Death on the Nile. Although I had some affection for Death on the Nile. I'm a big Kenny Branagh fan, the same way I was a big Sir Larry O fan when he was chewing the scenery at the end of his career. It's fun that Kenneth Branagh's traversing the same arc that Olivier did to the point where he actually played Olivier. So yeah, I'm down. I love those movies, and there's something interesting about them. He also does Poker Face,
yes.
which I love. Any kind of mystery. I'm a huge Columbo head. I like Poker Face a lot. I read all those Agatha Christie novels when I was growing up. I'm down. I mean, I want more. I'd rather have more of those than more James Bond movies. Let me put it that way.
And Evan, your thoughts on Wake Up Dead Man?
Title aside, which I don't love, I am a huge fan of the Knives Out movies, like Odie, and big Ryan Johnson fan in general. And I know these are really fun ensemble movies, so I'm pretty psyched to hear that we've got this, another stacked cast between Kerry Washington, Andrew Scott, Glenn Close, who I love, Mila Kunis. That's just some fun casting. I'm reading a list that also says Daryl McCormick could be attached to this as well, and he's one of my favorite kind of recent up and coming guys out there. So I'm psyched about it. And like Odie, I'm fine if they make a million more of these. Between this and Poker Face, Ryan Johnson knows how to write a good mystery and take things that well trod territory, but make them still feel fun and fresh.
Yeah, I'm excited about this too. I just watched Glass Onion again, maybe for the first time since I saw it at its premiere with my wife, and she still really enjoyed it. And it's funny that you mentioned some cast members, Evan, that might be attached because Glass Onion ended up almost being a cameo fest. Because as you watch it, you're like, oh, there's that person, or I didn't expect that person to be there. and I think it was like one of the last screen appearances by like Steven Sondheim ended up being, and so we'll see who else Ryan Johnson has on the screen this time for his third entry.
Right, and justice for Janelle Monáe, who was fantastic in that movie and deserved Oscar consideration. I'm still mad that I voted for her in our National Society of Film Critics first round. She didn't make it out of the first round, but I stood my ground for her.
Yeah, that was a great performance from her because she's almost essentially playing like two different roles.
Yes.
Don't want to spoil too much of the movie, even though it's X years old now. Yeah, it's definitely both movies are definitely fun and come highly recommended from the three of us here. But let's move along and get to what our feature is today, and that is director Richard Linklater, who for the past 3 decades has made some pretty fantastic films. I'd say that I'm a fan of more of his movies than not. He seems to be have a fascination with time and of period in general. From his ode to the '70s and Dazed and Confused to his couple that has to meet at 3 different time periods in the Before trilogy, to his renowned film Boyhood, which did this miraculous thing of filming this boy growing up year to year and making a coherent narrative around it. Richard Linklater continues to new elements in film outside of his new film Hitman, which we'll be talking about. He also has another film in production, a an adaptation of the musical Merrily We Go Along, and his plan is to film it over the next 20 years with actor Paul Mescal in the lead. And I'm excited to see how that ultimately comes about. I
I'll
think
be
like
dead.
I think some of it is like there has to be some kind of fear in the project, right? That everybody has to be alive and doing well and still interested in what they're doing to film a movie over 20 years. But we'll worry about that when it comes out in 2044 here. But let's start with you, Odie, and why don't you tell me a little bit about your history with Richard Linklater and maybe where you first saw his films.
Well, I remember Siskel and Ebert talking about Slacker. And I didn't see Slacker. I wound up seeing it on video, but I did go see Dazed and Confused because it had gotten a lot of good reviews in the paper, and I'd heard some good things about it. So I think that's where I started, was with Dazed and Confused. And then they were he had done what's the name of that movie he did with the Newton Boys with Matthew McConaughey. It was I had some affection for it, though it's not a good movie. Uh, and so we'd gotten through that, and then I mentioned I wrote a piece on the on Richard Linklater for the Sunday Globe. It's in the paper today, and I talked about how I had seen Before Sunrise and I'd seen the Newton Boys, and that was the only reason why I would go see School of Rock. They were offering a free screening of School of Rock at the AMC Empire 25. I couldn't call it the bed bug in the paper, but I can call it the bed bug here. The bed bug 25 was showing that movie, and it was free. Back then, I don't know if you remember this, they used to hand out like papers in the theater. Do you want to come to a test screen? Do you want to come to a regular screening of a movie? And I was one of them. And that was the only reason why I went to see it, was because of the director. And because I couldn't stand Jack Black and I couldn't stand Mike White at the time. And I went and I was stunned by how much I really, really enjoyed the film. How this guy looks at music and looks at people who love music in a certain way. It has music in his films, or has people who are just these, I don't want to say nerdy guys, but these people who are into this music. And so the fact that he made a movie about kids with Jack Black as the lead was great. And I was stunned by how much I loved it. It was my number 3 movie of the year, in fact. And so from there, I walk into the theater with a blank slate for every director. Otherwise, I would never have seen another David Lynch movie, or some of the other directors whom I don't really care for, but I've seen all of their movies. And I think the next movie he did after that was Before Sunset, and I went to see it because I like Before Sunrise a lot. And I'll never forget this. In the last scene, which I won't spoil for anybody, but the last scene is of Ethan Hawke's character and Julie Delpy's character. And she says something to the effect of, "Baby, you're gonna miss your plane." And he says, "I know." And I started to pray in the theater, and I said, "Okay, Lord, let this movie end right now. Let the movie end right now." And the movie faded to black as soon as I said that, and I was just stunned. Fell out of my chair, like, "Oh my God, man. If I knew my prayer would be answered, I'd ask for money." Uh, and I just realized that this guy is something, and I wanted to see more of his work. Especially if you can make a sequel, that I think is actually better than the original. Then he did the Bad News Bears, which was bad. And Billy Bob Thornton may be bad Santa, but he is no Walter Matthau. And I saw the Bad News Bears when it came out, so I have much affection for this movie. And the remake was bad, so yeah. Again, I walk in with a blank slate, so I try to keep an open mind about that because the next couple of movies I wasn't too crazy about either. I know they did Fast Food Nation around this time. I didn't like it all. Um, and he did A Scanner Darkly, which I think is interesting. We should talk about his innovation because even if you don't like the movie that he's done some things that are daring for a director who's made several movies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's get back to Scared Darkly, Odie. Let's let Evan get a chance here. Evan, can you tell me how you came to Richard Linklater and really how you feel about him?
I think my first introduction to him was seeing Dazed and Confused at some point on in the DVD days, and really enjoying how atmospheric it is and how nostalgic it is for the 70s. Even though I didn't grow up during the 70s, I really enjoyed the movie. I enjoyed the glimpse into high school life with all of its ups and downs. And so I was just kind of on the lookout for other stuff that he was doing. I ended up seeing School of Rock and loving it, and it's still to this day I very much enjoy it. But I love Jack Black, so it was a little bit easier for me. Um, and it's such a charming movie, and a lot of that has to do with Richard Linklater just direction and just allowing everybody to shine. Jack Black, the kids, they're all. I've been enjoying keeping up with what the kids have been up to.
And Joan Cusack, don't forget her.
Yes, Joan Cusack too. Oh my god, I can't think of Stevie Nicks without thinking of her dancing on the table. We're getting drunk at uh, that bar with Jack Black. And yeah, and I was about to say I've actually enjoyed keeping up with what the kids from the movie have been up to on social media, at their reunions and whatnot. And I think two of them are dating and or engaged or married or something like that. So I think that's really cute. Um, and then yeah, I've just kind of sporadically seen other movies in his filmography. I remember liking Boyhood quite a bit. Everybody Wants Some. It's been described as a kind of spiritual sequel to Dazed and Confused, which I would agree with, but it's more 80s focused, like early 80s. Last Flag Flying I thought was really great. And then most recently I watched Hitman. So I think I haven't seen any of the before movies, and I feel like that's definitely a hole in my Richard Linklater knowledge. But I did catch up with Slacker most recently. I caught that last night in preparation for talking about him today.
Oh well, wonderful. That I think that's a good place to start, which we'll circle back to Slacker very quickly. For me, I think like how I came to Richard Linklater was probably through the Before trilogy. I have probably a well-known love of the Sofia Coppola movie Lost in Translation, and that movie with Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson, with having a lot of just talking and enjoying life scenes, and that kind of led me to finding the Before movies because like they kind of have similarities, and I really connected with the Before Sunset movie and Before Sunrise. I love this idea of like, oh, you're gonna find your one person in the world and let fate kind of take its chance of whether or not you'll find yourselves again. And it was a time and place where like they didn't share emails or phone numbers, or they just kind of let the world happen. And sure, now I've seen other movies where um I use that same idea. Whether I think like, oh, I forget this classic movie, but the it has the same idea where they're on a boat and they have this great relationship, and then they go back to where they live, and they're supposed to meet at this tower, and the guy gets like delayed or
Love
something.
affair.
Like a love affair, yeah. It kind of reminds me exactly of that, and I really enjoy that kind of idea of I find it romantic, I guess. Maybe not everybody. Maybe they find, maybe they find it frustrating, but I find the idea of like meeting up again and finding that one to be pretty special. From there, I enjoyed a lot of his other movies. I think like for like everyone else, I think School Rock is a big highlight. It's a movie that kind of stands alone out of these, and it was really accessible movie. Sure, anybody who turns on School Rock is probably going to enjoy it. Of course, I've seen a bunch of other ones, and up to Hitman, but I have never actually seen Slacker. I think I've tried to see it once, but wasn't successful. But I'm interested to hear both of you on it. Evan, let's hear your first watch about it because you just watched it.
I mean, I don't know if this is controversial opinion or not, but it was definitely not my kind of movie. I like the idea of it. I like the premise that it's kind of got this wandering eye that's kind of drifting in and out of people in Austin. It's just kind of following people around, drifting from conversation to conversation, from place to place. But oh man, I feel like I was trapped for 97 minutes in conversations with people I didn't want to be trapped in conversations with, often speaking in stoner musings. Like the opening of the film is like Richard Linklater is on a bus and he gets in a cab and he's talking to the cabbie about his dreams and about how dreams lead to, every thought is its own reality and every choice that you make creates its own reality. And I thought, oh boy, is this what I'm getting into with this movie? Okay, let me give it a try. Let's see where it goes. But I just felt like I kept finding myself trapped in conversations that I was so bored by. But I could see why this idea, this style of movie would kind of get people's attention, and people would want to say, okay, let's give that guy a budget and let's see what he comes up with.
Yeah, Odie, do you have thoughts on this one?
Well, your opinion isn't controversial because I didn't care for it either. I called it my dinner with Austin. Um, it's a well-known fact that I despise my dinner with Andre. Like I hate it. I mean, I remember when Siskel and Ebert was ranting and raving about a lot of these movies I saw because of Siskel and Ebert, mind you. These movies I
Mhm.
would not, have known about in the hood. Um, and I watched it fairly recently because it was playing at the New York Film Festival. I thought it was even more boring. I said it was like being trapped in a snobby professor's navel for 120 minutes with no lint to plug up my ears. So I wasn't crazy about Slacker, but I found something interesting about it. And you mentioned Lost in Translation. I think Max, I think you did. I was not a fan of Lost in Translation until I went to Tokyo.
Okay.
And then I realized what Sofia Coppola was doing. I still am not a huge fan of it, but I think that if they were going to give her an Oscar, it should have been for directing because she captured what it felt like to be in Tokyo. When I went to Tokyo, I even went to the Park Hyatt and sang more than the Roxy Music song, just because. Um, and so, same thing with Slacker. When I was working in Austin, when I covered South by Southwest, back when it was just a music festival, and when I worked in Austin when I was in tech, I got a feel for what he was trying to do. And I think that's probably why he got a budget for other things. Keep in mind, at the same time, Cameron Crowe was doing Singles, which I think is the year after this, and movies about a specific place in the country. So, for Crowe, it was Seattle, right? Singles. For this, it's Austin. So there was that whole kind of subgenre of movies where these directors are giving you a time and place of a specific location.
Yeah, I can see that, like whether or not um that they're just trying to hone in their town or their experience. And of course, Linklater would go again and again to show us Austin and what life was there. I think, like, listening to both of you, I think I remember, like, maybe I had the same result when I tried to watch Slacker. Like, maybe I just, like, kind of tapped out because of the conversations, and it doesn't have like a really driving narrative to get you through where you're going. But it showed enough to get us to Dazed and Confused, which I look at this movie and I just rewatched it, and I really enjoy George Lucas's American Graffiti, and this movie really reminds me of that. Just like this one's doing the '70s instead, and you have a great cast of future um, you know film stars we'll see all the time, from Parker Posey to Ben Affleck to Matthew McConaughey. It's funny because I think this was the second time I've ever seen it, and you see these actors show up, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I can't believe he was in this," and he's so young, and you have that kind of effect on it. I think the other thing I take away from it, and is just like how hazing was just a thing back in the '70s, and
Yeah.
the way the things that they get away with in this movie. You think about kids today, and like the parents would be going ape shit
When you look at
about
Animal House, you look at School Days, similar things are going on with hazing and craziness. Um, I think you mentioned that Everybody Wants Some is kind of a spiritual sequel to Dazed and Confused. I liked Everybody Wants Some even more than it was number 10 on my 10 best list. It takes place in 1980. I found it to be quite interesting in that the movie was incredibly homoerotic, and Richard Linklater said that he had no idea. So that added to the camp value of the film. That I said in my review, and I also kind of stole the line from my piece on Sunday, that these guys have more costume changes than Betty Davis.
it.
They're constantly preening and changing their outfits, and it's like watching The Women, the 1939 George Cukor movie. And so it's interesting in how his relationships with characters, with the relationships with each other, especially in a movie that has several characters, like Dazed and Confused, like Everybody Wants Some, like in Slacker, although I wouldn't call them quote unquote characters, I call them, more just like talking heads. But it's interesting that he's good with an ensemble. And lest we forget, Matthew McConaughey and several of these other actors have appeared in Ethan Hawke, have appeared in several of Richard Linklater's movies. It's almost like his little stock company.
Right, absolutely. Evan, do you remember what you took away from Dazed and Confused last time you saw
I mean, just as a good time.
it?
It's just it's a fun watch seeing the ensemble. As Odie just mentioned, he's good with an ensemble. He knows how to get, some great performances from people, and there's a lot of character actors in Dazed and Confused that I think their careers didn't necessarily take off. Like I'm looking at the cast list here on IMDb, and I'm like, oh, Cole Hauser, that was a guy that, like, they were. I feel like it was maybe poised in like the late '90s, early 2000s to go somewhere. It didn't. Some other people in the cast, but they're good in this. And I love the music, of course. I love me some '70s music, and this film definitely has some great tracks.
It
And
says 1976. I'm looking at the IMDb with you. This movie takes place in May of 1976. I would have been 6 years old. What the movie taught me was that, and a lot of '70s movies do, is that I was born too freaking late.
Why, you would have loved the '70s?
Yeah, because people were having sex and not being afraid they were going to die.
Yeah.
Remember when I became an adolescent, remember what was going on. Also, it seemed like a lot more fun, and not that I want to be like face down in a bowl of cocaine in Studio 54. Although I was obsessed with Studio 54 as a kid. I mean, it was just like when I finally got to go to Studio 54 was to see Cabaret. So I never got to go there in the disco era because I was obviously born too late. So all these great things I hear about my older cousins talking about, and they're of the age that Dazed and Confused characters would be, it seemed like it was so much fun. Maybe it's not. Maybe the grass is always greener. And somebody would say that the '80s were a lot more fun than like they're like the 2000s. They were in high school in 2000s as opposed to me being in high school in the 80s. They might see it as a with more rose, the colored glasses, but it just looked like it was fun. Like, you could get away with things, and it just seemed like a hell of a lot more fun than my existence with Reagan.
No,
Mhm.
I see a lot of Dazed and Confused and like just like that freedom that they had. It just really connects. And again, I like how you mentioned earlier with before Sunset that Linklater has a knack for knowing when to end his films, and Dazed and Confused feels very much that way as well. It doesn't like overstay its welcome. You don't really find out if the star football player is going to end up playing football or not, and because he doesn't sign his contract to follow the rules. But that's not really ultimately the story here. It's about following these young adults on the last day of school and into the evening, and in that case, it's a success. Um,
Don't you miss the days when movies allowed you to not know something?
no, I didn't spell everything out right.
That you could leave a movie and wonder, well, I wonder what happened to that person, and you don't have to get an answer. Or you'd have to
Mhm.
get an answer. What were they doing? Dazed and Confused, the prequel, like Muppet Babies, except it's Dazed and Confused when they're 9 and they're in grammar school. I miss the days when I didn't have to be told there was 8 million prequels going on. That I could just sit and wonder what happened to Tess McGill at the end of Working Girl. I could think about it. I don't need to see Working Girl the prequel.
Yeah, totally. It's making me think that Amazon's releasing that Legally Blonde prequel, and I'm like, why? Why do we need that? Why do we need to know what I mean, we saw her become a more fully fleshed out character in the Legally Blonde movies.
Exactly. And again, it's like they have to. My problem with Furiosa was that it was connecting the dots to Fury Road. So it's basically you're watching this movie, the gears shift in this movie. George Miller's like, how do I get her arm torn off? How do I do this? And it's not necessary. Charlize Theron and Miller had done such a great job of creating that character. Same thing with the Dazed and Confused. Now, before Sunrise and that whole series is going forward. And we're seeing these characters, and it's not necessarily the same movie because they become even more improvisational as you go along, and you're seeing them at different periods in life. To the Midnight actually is only 10 years older than Sunset, but it fast forwards 20 years in the lives of these people. See, he's doing something, at least giving you characters that are doing something different. It's not the same as before Sunrise. They don't go on another trip and they get on a train to Berlin this time. There's an entirely different movie with these characters in it, and that I could buy into, but not. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going off on this tangent and this
No,
rant.
that's okay.
I
And
miss it.
I have a
Yeah.
problem with prequels for a lot of that same reason, Odie, because like like ultimately these people have to end up in a certain place, and like so it takes away some of the drama because like where they have to eventually be, and you can like see the story beats happening, and is that something you needed? I don't know, but
I
I
would love to see another Furiosa sequel as opposed to a prequel. Get Charlize Theron back, and I wouldn't have minded that because Mad Max was a progression. The three movies are him going ahead in time.
right. And no, I think even what bothered me, and I'll follow you on this tangent, is like, and the end credits of Furiosa, they basically show Fury Road.
Yeah, it was like the biopics when they do the biopic when they show you the real person at the end of the movie. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, I was
We
like,
show you the real Furiosa now. You spent 3 hours with the Queen's Gambit Furiosa.
yeah. So I don't know. I think we should move on to fully talking about the before movies, and I guess that would be Odie and I carrying these because Evan doesn't have much experience with them. But yeah, it's really Ethan Hawke and Julie Delphi, and they have this chance meeting on a train. They seem to like each other, and they take this big gamble that they're going to get off the train and spend the day together and see how it goes. And that day changes their lives forever. How eventually Richard Linklater and Ethan Hawke and Julie Delphi decide how they're going to meet up again in the next movie is a pleasure in and of itself. Now, not to spoil, if you will. But each time they get together, it's exciting, and I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because we love the characters so much, and we want them to be together. But even then, the three of them give us another curveball in the third movie in the trilogy and show us like ultimately, even these dreams of being together can't ultimately be fairy tales. They come with some really hard realities about life, and that's why I think the third one is so rewarding as opposed to the almost the fairy tale-ness of the first two.
Right.
Odie, do you have more to say about the Before trilogy?
Well, again, I liked all three of them, but I think Sunset's my favorite. I think it was my number one movie that year. I like that they do something different, but also at the same time, it's a progression. If you think about real life, and you really shouldn't with a lot of movies, but this progression of their relationship, and it becomes, as you get older, Before Sunrise is kind of a almost, I don't want to say a teenager's movie, but certainly a young person's film. And I saw it. I was in my 20s when I saw it, and then I had a different perspective on life than when I saw Midnight. Later on, 2 decades later, practically. And Before Sunrise set out to be this, romantic kind of almost French type film. You could see Eric Romer doing this kind of movie. I mean, he did, and the innocence of this relationship that Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke have, and Before Sunrise, is interesting. I've always said I'm a cynic, and a cynic is a romantic whose ass has been shredded by life. And I think that this series kind of backs me up on that, and that the Before Midnight is somewhat more cynical, but at the same time, there's still an undercurrent of what these two people saw in each other way back in that fairy tale time. It's like the honeymoon period is Before Sunrise. And
Yep.
Before Sunset is kind of let's get serious about it. And Before Midnight is kind of what have we done?
Mm-hmm.
And where are we? So I think there's a maturity to that I find a lot of movies don't really have, especially if they're going through multiple films.
Yeah, and let's not kid ourselves that these are definitely not like I guess mainstream movies that people would enjoy. Like we all enjoy like School Rock, we mentioned. There is some need to sit with these movies and to take them in and actually listen to what these characters are saying, because if you're not actively engaging with them walking and talking, basically the Aaron Sorkin-ness of it, the walk and talk, then you're gonna miss a lot of character development, and
Right.
it's really pivotal to really focus in on this movie, even if what they're doing isn't like blowing up cars.
Well, this is not a Netflix movie. I always say Netflix movies, and I reviewed my share of them at RogerEbert.com. It was one, I think it was one of the Sylvester Stallone ones, where I literally walked away and came back 10 minutes later and I wasn't lost. Those movies are like that. They're like,
Nice.
I'm ironing my clothes, I'm cutting my toenails, I'm feeding the cat, and in the background there's this movie going on. And every 10 minutes, if I look at it, I'll know where I am. This is not like that. This is a movie you have to sit with, like you said, and it's a talky film. There's nobody blowing up any cars, but you really have to sit with this and watch them because their body language, their facial reactions, the tone of voice, what's going on. It's a movie you need to pay attention to, a series you need to pay attention to.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful way to put it, and I think all three are rewarding if you give it your attention and time. But Odie, you mentioned earlier you wanted to talk a little bit about a Scanner Darkly. Is that something you wanted to go back to now, or was there something else you wanted to talk
But
about?
I just wanted to make the comparison between that and Waking Life, and that these are two movies that most directors might not have taken a chance on doing. Simply because of the strangeness of them, the science fiction type things of Scanner Darkly is Philip K. Dick, right? And
Yep.
so you're not expecting this from Richard Linklater, although Waking Life kind of gives you possibilities to do something different or strange. Um, I wasn't crazy about Scanner Darkly when I first saw it, but I've kind of come around to it a little bit more and found that I, there are movies that I admire more than I like. I always say that, and it doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that it hit me a little bit differently, and it was took a little bit more time for me to kind of come around to say, okay, I see what this movie's doing, and I have to respect it. I think that was one of the movies of his that I would say that about.
All right. And then I think I'll talk for all three of us in that. I assume that we've all seen Boyhood, given um its status and its reputation and what have you. But it
Hmm.
was certainly a movie that, um, did a lot of experimenting. It was released by IFC Films, and uh, yeah, undoubtedly it was a gamble to even make, because this idea that they were going to follow a boy throughout the years and film all the time, and I guess Richard Linklater's daughter is a part of it, and Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette, and they all committed to doing this film and getting together every few years, and the idea that they're not only capturing um, these specific years and this time period. I feel like some of it is like a IV drip into my nostalgia veins when they turn on like Coldplay's Yellow at the beginning of the
Yeah.
movie, or like certain music cues. I mean, I didn't have the whole Harry Potter experience, but watching them go to book releases and stuff like that was like, oh yeah, that was the youth around that time, and I could definitely hone in on that. I don't. I revisited some of it, and I don't know how much I think that it's a great narrative as much as I think that it's a narrative that suits the mission. But I'm interested to hear what you think about it, Evan.
I mean, it was definitely a bold decision on his part to shoot this movie over, I think it was 12 years time, and kind of revisit with the characters. But I think it was really successful. I mean, it's not a movie I feel inclined to necessarily go back and rewatch or ponder often, but I think it's really well directed. You got some really great natural performances from the leads, from Ethan Hawke, Patricia Arquette, Eller Coltrane, and Lorelai Linkletter, as you mentioned, his daughter. And I like that the movie kind of tackles like tough issues, divorce, alcoholism, abuse, and it. I feel like it also does it very naturally. It didn't to me when I saw it come off as like judgmental or preachy. Like you, I enjoyed the soundtrack and how it was kind of a smattering of tunes from the different periods that the film is covering. And yeah, I like its kind of overall message about, making the moments in life rather than the moments making us. Um, so I think it's well done. It like you said, Max. I think maybe it's not the best overall narrative, but it suits the movie quite well, and I thought it did a good job. So that's where I come down.
Yeah, I feel like it's like sometimes you could see like, oh, I'm gonna introduce this character, so there's like some kind of like child abuse that has to like be fought against, or Patricia Arquette's gonna go through messy relationships just because. But I'm not gonna say that's not a life for somebody, because most certainly there's plenty of people who've had lives like that. I could see it in
Right.
absentee fathers like Ethan Hawke, and what have you. Odie, I'm interested in your take on this movie, whether or not this is a boyhood that resonated with you.
Well, I got in a lot of trouble for this movie because I gave it 3 stars, and I. It's funny because my editor, she's gonna yell at me for this, but I don't care. My original word that I used in my piece was gimmick.
Yeah.
He said that sounds like it's negative, and I said, well, yeah, it is negative, but I mean, I like the movie. Michael Apted had done a movie where he spent 56 years following people, so that
Yep.
Richard Linklater spent 12. I'm not exactly like jumping for joy with being impressed, but my issue was that I felt that the end didn't justify the means at the end of the day in terms of it being narratively, you know, interesting. And I got in trouble, and some critic I won't name made a comment that I didn't like the movie because I was black. And I said, well, first of all, I'm a boy. I went through practically everything this kid goes through. I even got a Bible for Christmas. I
Yeah.
didn't get the gun that went with it, but I got a Bible for Christmas. come from a religious family. There were a lot of things I could identify with. I know a lot of alcoholics. And I just felt that they spent 12 years, and this is the movie that came out of it. And I thought Patricia Arquette was wonderful and deserved her Oscar. I think he works very well with the young actor I think it was his first movie. And it's well done, and it's a nice B. It's not a 4-star movie. I wasn't jumping up and down and screaming and hollering and hoping it won every Oscar. So I got in a lot of trouble because, as we know, you have to have fealty for every movie that exists. Otherwise, you are cast out from the critics.
Right, like there's a hive, right?
Yeah, you have to just love it, and you can't say anything bad about it. And it's like, I love me, but I can say plenty of bad things about me. So boy, it's not getting the pass. But I liked it. I mean, I liked it. I did not love it.
Yeah, and I think like some of the people who really resonated with it felt it deep in their core. Like,
It spoke to them, and I'm always down with if the movie speaks to you, then that's important because art should provoke and it should also speak to you. And I will not begrudge anybody that felt that they saw their life on the screen. Boys in the Hood speaks to me, very, very much so. And I can understand if it didn't speak to someone else. But at the same time, it was such a big deal. I think the hype kind of made me a little more kind of, a
mhm.
little bit more side eye than I normally would have for it. But again, it's a good movie, and I don't want to piss on it. But I felt that narratively, what I got didn't seem to be worth the 12 years it spent for them to give it to me.
Mm. Yeah, that's oh god, that's such bullshit that people try to say that because you're black
Oh,
that
you don't know how many times I get to hear about this. Oh, you don't like this movie because you're black, and I'm like, it's the blackening. How can I like the
yeah.
blackening, but it's always that way that they need an excuse, and the best excuse they could go to is my skin color. And so, I've dealt with this many, many times, and I felt that, again, I think my experience growing up is probably closer to Boyhood than a lot of the people that were criticizing me about it.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, and that's funny too because I feel like they're actually making like even let's say that they were, for some horrible reason they were right. Like I feel like a movie should be accessible to everybody, and a bad movie you could watch and go, "Oh, you know what? I just didn't resonate with me because I'm XYZ person." So I feel like they're actually doing themselves a disservice by making that argument on top of it just being a stupid argument in the first
Right.
place.
Roger talked about how movies are an empathy machine and how you go to the movies, see something you don't see in real life. I'd be bored shitless at the Odie Henderson story. I'd give it 1 star. And so I like seeing things that I remember that Leave No Trace. I
Yeah.
didn't understand a single thing about anything these characters, their existence or anything, but I was drawn to it. I gave it 4 stars. I felt like I maybe didn't understand their life, but I felt empathy for them and what they were going through and what they had done. I don't need to have a movie tell me something I already know. I like it when movies tell me something I don't know or show me something I haven't seen. And I think that's my curiosity about movies will never die because I'll always have that.
Yeah, and Leave No Trace, that's a great movie, like people living on the outskirts of life due to some circumstances that leave them mentally conflicted about rejoining society.
Yes.
And yeah, I thought that was a pretty great movie myself. Um Odie, you mentioned before we started that you wanted to mention a little bit something about Last Flag Flying.
Oh yeah. So Last Flag Flying, I did a piece in the paper a couple of months ago about the last detail, which my pops said was as close to what it felt like to be in the Navy as he's ever experienced in his life. And if you've seen the last detail, that's not a positive statement for the Navy, but it's about being a lifer. These characters in the last detail are lifers, and Darryl Panickson's novel, which I've read, kind of spoke to that, and Robert Towne's screenplay for the last detail also spoke to that. A nice '70s Hal Ashby kind of counterculture, very angry film with Jack Nicholson's best performance in my mind. So they said they were going to do a sequel, regardless of the fact that it was written by the same guy, Darryl Panickson. I didn't want to see it. And they weren't bringing back any of the 3 actors who were in it, and Otis Young is dead, so they couldn't bring him back. And I just didn't want anything to do with it. And I saw it in New York Film Festival, and I realized that what they had done was same thing like what they had done with Before Sunset, Before Midnight. They had taken these characters, and it's a bit of a softer film than a 1973 film would be, but at the same time, it's kind of like it's even sadder because you see these people have really been beat down now, and you really see that that's kind of become their existence, is that they've accepted their lot in what they had done in the first film. And this is, granted, it's a semi-sequel. It's not directly the same, type thing. It's a semi-sequel in a way. But the attitudes of Bryan Cranston and Steve Carell and Lawrence Fishburne are very interesting. And Lawrence Fishburne kind of looks like my pops, so I think maybe that was another part of me like projecting on the film.
Mhm.
But I really felt like it paid tribute to the original film in the regard of that it wasn't going to make this happy movie. And I felt that these characters, they lived with, at some point, you get beaten down by life and it stops being like an emergency and starts just being a drone, a day-to-day existence of what it is. I think the movie captures that. I think a lot of people were looking for another last detail, and that's not what they got, and it kind of offended them, which I can kind of see because in a way I was looking for the same thing. But I got on the movie's wavelength and I found something different. I think it was richer than what I had expected.
Yeah, it's nice to find something that you didn't expect and still resonate with it. Evan, was this a movie that you had watched?
Yeah, I've seen this movie, and admittedly, I'm an ignoramus and didn't even know the connection to The Last Detail. I just saw this movie and experienced it as, a single entity, but I remember finding it really compelling, a very moving movie about war, about loss, centered around these three characters, these old friends kinda getting back together to, for the one of them, his son had been killed in Iraq, and I just thought it had a really poignant commentary about war and the role that soldiers play in it and how it kind of affects people for the rest of their lives. And I think a lot of that has to do with Richard Linklater's direction, but it also has to do with these three leads giving really great performances and having really great chemistry. And Steve Carell, I feel like people know him for playing kind of these large characters, and I love that this movie gives him a chance to kind of showcase a much quieter, more reined in performance.
This is so much better than Foxcatcher. I mean, if they were going to nominate him for something, this would have been. I mean, Foxcatcher just made me want to pull my hair out. He's a much better actor than people give him credit for, and he is able to dig deep into a character and make that character small. I don't mean small like performance wise. I mean
Right.
small like physically.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Oh my god, Foxcatcher. I forgot about that movie. Yikes.
All right. I think that's going to lead us into the new release, which is Hitman. All three of us have seen the movie, whether it be in person or lengths or both. This one is Richard Linklater's latest film. It stars, I guess, a superstar in the making, or now superstar, Glenn Powell. He's everywhere now, and this movie is certainly has the ability to take him to the next level. His co-star in the film is Adria Arjona, and the movie basically has him, Glenn Powell, as he's portraying a, a professor slash um, police helper who tries to like get into these territories and like be a fake hitman and arrest people who have planned murders, almost like a Minority Report kind of thing. Um, it's based off a real guy who did this, which is funny. I think his name's like Gary Johnson, if I remember.
Yep.
And
Yep, just like in the movie.
yeah, so it's very hilarious. I mean, a lot of this movie where like Glenn Powell decides that he's going to be the hitman that the person who he's going to meet needs. And so he dresses up in lots of different outfits and takes on lots of different personas in order to get these people to admit their devious plan. But when he meets Andrea Arjona's character, she kind of portrays this woman who is in a very abusive relationship, and he kind of persuades her not to not to put him into a contract and give him money, but rather leave her husband and try to start a new life. And in doing so, he starts getting involved with her, and he the police office, the police station that he works for, everyone there begins to kind of question what he's doing, especially this one cop whose job he's taken, played by Austin Amello, who plays Jasper, and he desperately wants his job back, so he's watching for any mistake that Glenn Powell's Gary Johnson will do. I thought the movie was quite hilarious at times, and at other points it could be really sexy. I think that they have a lot of chemistry, the two leads, and I think like even like the missteps that I think that the movie takes at the very end, I think like even Richard Linklater's smart enough to even like chuckle at what he did narratively in the story to connect the whole thing. So I think it's a winner, and I think a lot of people will enjoy it. Evan, can you share some of your thoughts on Hitman?
Yeah, sure. We actually reviewed this over on Spoiler Piece Theater, and I'm a huge fan of the movie. I really enjoyed it. I like Glenn Powell quite a bit. I love that this movie reunites him with Austin Emilio. They were both in Everybody Wants Some. That movie definitely caught my attention. That brought it on to Glenn Powell and Austin Emilio, who I love from the Walking Dead TV show. So I was psyched to see them together. I really liked Glenn Powell. I don't know. For me, I don't know if the chemistry was quite there with the leads, but I do think this is an amusing enough story and interesting enough idea that I really got a lot of mileage out of it. I think sometimes the tone is a little funky, like when there's kind of the montage of him tricking the people into hiring him, and then you see their surprised mugshot. I don't know if that whole stylized bit was working for me, but
I
I
like that.
really nice. But I had fun with this. I did enjoy it quite a bit. I did like that it's based on a true story. I think I'll be interested to hear what you guys think about the ending. I know Max, you just kind of alluded to some thoughts on the ending. This was something we talked about over on Spoiler Piece about how he kind of settles down at the end. I personally kind of liked it. I felt like it was kind of in line with his character because he's kind of like he's had this hitman persona, Ron, and Gary is boring and everyone laughs at how boring he is. And there's that great sequence where Retta and the other colleague from work are talking about, they wouldn't hang out with Gary, but they both, fuck Ron, this hitman
Yeah.
character. And yeah, so I don't know. I feel like it kind of worked for me that his where he ended up was kind of like Gary, but like a little bit of Ron thrown in there at the end. But I'll be curious what you guys think about that.
Yeah, Odie, let's hear what you have to say about this one.
Well, I started out as a psych major, so what's interesting about this, and I quoted in both my review and in the Richard Linklater piece, is a line that Gary says to his students: "What if self is a construction of what we've been playing every day since you can remember?" And I found it to be an interesting idea with Gary slash Ron being this guy that Gary is the nerdy kind of guy that his wife says he's kind of a wet noodle in bed, and Ron is this hot guy because he believes in Ron. And so sex is 80% in your head, so he can be this powder keg. And the interesting thing for me is that I called it a comic neo noir, and I still stand by that. And that this got several noirish elements. Madison, the character, is
Mhm.
somewhat of a femme fatale if you think about it, and he's getting in over his head, which is what happens to every film noir hero. And also, there's a whole concept of crime, and that these people think that they're getting a hitman, when in actuality, as the movie points out, hitmen are not real. They are a construction made by movies and movies and movies that gives you this idea of what a hitman is supposed to look like. You look out and you see Elaine Dion as your hitman, or you look out and you see, Glenn Powell as your hitman. That's why he kept saying, "Who's your hitman?" He kept doing all those disguises. That's why it worked for me, because I found it interesting that he was, showing up as these different characters specifically to get your trust and to earn it before he turned you in. And you see a little bit of Gary when he decides to let Madison go initially. Now, I don't want to spoil the ending, but the reason why I said that this was Glenn Powell would make him a star is that every star making turn has a point where you have to either go with this character or you basically fall. And the movie fails because the character does something that is surprising that you're not expecting him to do. And it's not a nice thing. So you start to think about, can I buy this character after that? And you can. And I think that's what makes the direction great and what makes his performance so good.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that that turn is surprising, and ultimately, Gary Johnson is a character you want to root for. It's kind of like a an Al Pacino type thing, right? Where we've been watching this character and been admiring his goals and his mission throughout the whole
Right,
movie.
it's a little Donnie Brasco slash Carlito's way, a little bit, if you think about some of this.
Mhm.
The noirish elements of it I found to be quite entertaining, but I think it's very funny. And I think it plays with an audience a certain way because the tonal shifts, they're not, they can be jarring, but they're not badly done. I mean, they're quite well done. The turns this movie takes are quite well done. When you find out that Jasper may know a little bit more than he's letting on, or you find out how does he get out of the situation. I like movies where they put characters in situations and don't paint themselves in a corner script wise. That someone has to use their means to get out of a situation, or there's a knowing look between the two people that, we're going to come back to this later on. You're going to pay for this later. That kind of thing I kind of enjoy setup, the kind of setup to it. I
Mhm.
think the movie is quite sexy in terms of the fact that so many movies just don't, aren't being sexy anymore. There's this whole Gen Z thing about there's too much sex in movies, and I'm going to slap these people because, when I was 12, I was looking through the squiggly lines on cable trying to see a titty, and it would always be a thumb we thought was a nipple, but it was a thumb. I believe that now. But it's not every movie has to have. I did a thing with Tavis Smiley where he mentioned gratuitous nudity and sex and violence, and I said all nudity and violence is gratuitous in movies. So that word, I hate that word gratuitous because it's actually true. Captain Hepburn didn't need to pull her top off, thankfully. You sometimes you want to see a sexy movie, and you don't get that very often. I thought it lent itself to being a little sexier than I was expecting. In terms of because now we're in Ron's head, and now Ron is a stud, and Richard Linklater and Glenn Powell are going to give you something like that. I thought it was interesting in terms of there's that famous, the question: Can you change? Can you change your personality? Which leads to the ending of the film, where you can speak to that more about whether you bought it or not. What happens eventually happens to Gary. Now, the one thing I want to mention is Skip Hollandsworth, who the article in Texas Monthly that this is based on. The movie that he did before this with Linklater was Bernie, which is Jack Black's best performance, and also a similar story of a real character and how he sees himself and how his environment sees him.
Oh, that's interesting, and I like all the analogies you made. Certainly, I saw some double indemnity in here. That's a very easy connection to make with these noirs, and um, you can see that in Hitman. But yeah, I I don't know really too much what I want to add. I think like
Why don't you think the ending works for you, or it doesn't work as well as you think? That's the question I have. Well, I mean, we don't want to spoil the ending for folks. I mean, obviously, it's a true story, so the man isn't going to die. But obviously, this is not what happened to him in real life. This is the construction that they put together. But what bugged you about the ending? I'm
yeah, I think
curious.
that's what it is that, like, it's a fantasy, and, like, it's almost like Linklater in the credits that he tells you everything that Gary Johnson did in his life, and then, like, he kinda gives you a wink, wink,
And
um
this is what he didn't do. Wink, wink. Yeah,
yeah.
that's clever.
Yeah, yeah, like, I don't know, maybe that kinda redeemed it a little bit for me, because, like, is that, like, he was in on the joke and everything, but yeah, it was that idea, Odie, that, like, this was a character that did, uh, turn out to be different than I thought he would be, but, maybe that's ultimately what he needed to be. I think now I remember what I did want to add is I really appreciated not only the officers noticing the change in him, but also his students because he's a professor and like
Yeah,
they see his progression and they're like, oh, when did our professor get
Where's that
hot?
person get hot? Yeah,
Yeah,
it was funny.
yeah.
right. Yeah, because he gained that confidence, and I'm glad you brought that up, Odie, about the classroom scenes because I actually that was one thing I really liked about this movie was the way it was weaving his lectures on identity and self into the narrative and how we were kind of, as you were just saying, seeing that evolution of the character as he gains more confidence, but he also gains more students. If you notice, his classes get bigger and bigger and bigger. By the end, he's in a large lecture hall with a ton of students.
I didn't notice that both times I saw it, so thank you for pointing it out. Now I realize that that's true. He's outside with them at one point, and there's like 50 kids. You're right.
Um, yeah, I guess Evan, do you have final thoughts on Hitman here?
Oh, I don't know. I think we covered it though. I'm glad we talked about the ending. I know we're not doing spoilers here, so but I can see how some people the ending didn't quite work, but I think the winkiness as you just mentioned of the kind of post of the end credits kind of worked for me.
I think if this movie doesn't work for people, I think Bernie might work for them a little bit better in terms of how it reconciles itself. Bernie's a much darker picture than this, even though it's got Jack Black and it's got real people from the town. This that almost has like a half documentary, half um, movie type feel to it. This would have been very interesting to hear what Gary Johnson had to think about this movie. Unfortunately, he passed away. The movie's dedicated to him, so we don't know. But I mean, I think if someone made a movie and I was as hot as Ron, I would be more than happy to accept this.
Yeah, for sure. And now you have me interested in watching Bernie, Odie, so I feel like I need to check it out.
Yeah, it's based on a true story, and then Bernie Jack Black is a murderer, and it's his best performance. I think he got the Golden Globe for it. Not that Golden Globes mean shit, but this is I think the only time he got a nomination for acting. I think besides that, in School of Rock, but it's a different kind of role for him, and
Mhm.
it's really interesting because I there's something about these actors like Jack Black, like John Belushi, like Chris Farley. There's something in their eyes. And even though Jack Black got on my nerves for the majority of his career, uh, there's something about him that like it comes out in his voice in Kung Fu Panda. That there's kind of this vulnerability to him that he doesn't really get to do very often. And so this isn't very necessarily a vulnerable picture because he's a murderer, but it's an idea of let's see him do something that's within his wheelhouse that you're not expecting him to do.
All right. That is a great place to end our conversation on Richard Linklater. Um, Now we're going to discuss where you can find us before we go into what we've been watching section. If you want to follow the podcast, we're on Blue Sky. We have a presence on X. It's the Pick Pod. You can email us at it's the pictures at gmail.com. Visit the website, visit the letterbox, what have you. We have a newsletter that is run on there. I recently did reviews of I saw the TV Glow and the new volleyball anime movie Haikyuu, and you can check those out there. Evan, where can people find you?
Let's see. I'm on X, aka Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, Letterboxd, as Real Recon, and that's real as in film reel.
Wonderful. And Odie, where can people find you?
Now, I'm Odinator everywhere except Instagram, where I'm Odinator2 because I forgot Odinator's password. So I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Letterboxd. Um, I'm not on Twitter. I rarely ever show up, but once in a blue moon I do. But for the most part, Blue Sky is the one. We had to have one social media presence for the paper, and I chose that one. I'm on Threads also. So again, I'm Odinator everywhere. It's easy to find me.
All right, wonderful. And of course, if people want to read your work, Odie, they can find it in the Boston Globe, right?
Yes, I'm at the Boston Globe, and if you want to read earlier work, I'm at BennettRogerEbert.com. I was there for 11 years. I think about Roger every so often because we would talk about how much I wanted to be a newspaper man, and I think he'd be proud that I got the gig, even if it is the Boston Globe. Just kidding,
uh,
bosses. Don't fire me.
um, all right, awesome. We're gonna go into the what you've been watching section. Um, let's see here. Who hasn't talked to a while? Evan, why don't you go through what you've been watching?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what I watched earlier today. I went to the movies to see the Muppet movie for its 45th anniversary
Oh, that's
re-release.
right. Thank you for reminding me of that.
It's funny that you should mention that, consider that new Jim Henson biopic, Jim Henson I Dare Man, just showed up on Disney Plus. So I guess it's kind of fortuitous that you're watching the Muppet movie in theaters right now.
Yeah, should definitely go see it. I put on my Kermit sneakers and socks and my Sam the Eagle shirt for the movie. Yeah, I'm a big Muppet fan. First time seeing the Muppet movie on the big screen for me. I'm not sure how I've gone this long, considering the Brattle in Boston, I think, usually does a Muppet.
And I did a
Uh,
whole section. I did a whole seminar on the Muppet movie at the Coolidge, and we showed it.
Damn, I'm sad I missed that.
I
That
did
would have
this
been fun.
entire seminar. I wore a Kermit the Frog shirt, and I wore a shirt that said, "I appreciate the Muppets more than you." When I did the seminar, and I wore the Kermit the Frog shirt, him on a bicycle, when I did the introduction of the Muppet movie at the Coolidge. Yeah, I did that then. So you missed it. Sorry.
Damn, that's cool. I didn't know you were a Muppet guy. That I'm
I love
very
the
happy to hear
Muppets.
this. Let's see. Okay, so just some quick thoughts about seeing the big screen. I mean, obviously, I was psyched to see it. I really feel like the movie's first like 3 songs are extremely strong, and then there's a couple in the middle there that I forget when I watch it when we get to like Miss Piggy's song and Gonzo's song. I don't like them nearly as much as like Can You Picture That, Rainbow Connection, Moving Right Along. But I love the Muppets. I love their sense of humor. I love all the celebrity cameos in it. And I don't know. I just get so choked up at the end when they like blow open the studio roof and the rainbow comes in and they're singing and I don't know. There's something about the Muppets, their unbridled sense of joy, their desire to accept people and to make them laugh and entertain them that continues to resonate with me. So I was glad to finally see the Muppet movie on the big screen.
That's awesome. I love the Muppet movie. I saw it at the drive-in, and then really quick, when MoMI here, Museum Moving Image, has the Henson exhibit, permanently, and they always do Jim Henson things every so often. And have the kids come, Henson's kids come and talk about them. And when they showed the Muppet movie, it was the first time I seen it in the theater since I was a kid. And I go and it gets to the Rainbow Connection, I just burst into tears, and I was like, it was incredible. I couldn't believe this, that I was just sitting here crying at the Muppet movie. But I can't believe that you don't like Miss Piggy's song "Never Before." I love that. And then the Gonzo song is so pretty. It's just, I like all the songs in this movie, but can you picture that as like Paul Williams, like distilled down to his finest essence, I should say. And the fact that the
Yeah.
Rainbow Connection didn't win the Oscar for Best Song just irritates me to no end. Do you know what song won? At the Muppet
Oh,
movie, my seminar, I offered $20 and a free foot massage to anybody that could tell me that the song that won over the Muppet movie song, and nobody knew.
you know what's sad, Odie, is that before the movie they had Leonard Maltin, a clip of him introducing and saying the song that won, and I've already forgotten what it was.
Yeah, it was from Norma Ray.
That's
Okay.
right.
And Jennifer Warren sang it. I think Jennifer Warren holds the record for singing most Oscar songs that won Best Song. I think she has 4.
Damn.
She sang Up Where We Belong. She sang I Had Time of My Life. She sang It Goes Like It Goes, which is the Norma Ray song that won the Oscar. And she sings one more, and I can't remember what it is, but I'm pretty sure it's 4.
Yeah,
Those are
I
some
love
tough songs.
the Paul Williams contributions to the Muppets music, and
Yeah, the Emmett Otter's Drug Band and the Muppet. Since he's just so perfect. He said he's perfect because he's the same size as Kermit.
Yeah, it's funny to see him in something like what's that horror movie that
The
he's in?
Phantom of Paradise.
Yeah, Phantom of the
It's a
Paradise.
Brian De Palma movie. Or to see him in some of the other movies, like one of the Smokey and the Bandit movies he's in, like one of the bad ones. He's in that. Unless we forget, he got Barbara Streisand her second Oscar by writing Evergreen with her for the worst of these Star is Born adaptations.
Yeah.
Can I mention what I've been watching real quick?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Odie.
So I watched Robot Dreams again, which
Oh,
I
great.
saw last year, and they Boston held the movie till the 14th, which upset me because I'd written such a good review that I wanted everybody to read, and I can't give it to them until the 14th. And I also watched Thelma, which I loved. June Squibb is coming out, as opposed to Summer Camp, which I reviewed this week. Glenn Close is doing, Knives Out, and Diane Keaton and Kathy Bates are in these horrible old lady movies that people yell at me for being mean to, but they're bad. And I want to see Diane Keaton and Alfre Woodard and Kathy Bates in something that they deserve to be in, not with like
Mhm.
playing teenagers. Like Diane Keaton talking about getting a second base with Eugene Levy. Hello, honey, like you're too old for second base, girl. So I've been watching. This was a bad week for me because I rewatched Robot Dreams, which was supposed to come out today, was Friday in Boston, but they moved to the 14th. And then I had Young Woman in the Sea, which is Disney's Naiad, and I had Summer Camp. And so it was a bad week because I had to put up with those awful movies. But Robot Dreams kind of saved the day for me and made it wonderful. I've also been reliving my adolescence and watching Quincy at 3 o'clock in the morning. Quincy, the TV show with Jack Klugman as the forensics agent from the 70s, forensics examiner. I've gone back to my childhood, been watching all these reruns of things on MeTV, where I turn on my television and suddenly it's 1974.
Yeah, that I've never seen that, but I do love Jack Klugman, so I'll have
You
to
should
check
watch
that
Quincy.
out.
It's awesome. There's like 7 seasons of it. He's the forensic examiner, and you learn a lot about dead bodies on the show. It's the CGI before CSI before CSI, way before CSI. It also just makes me feel incredibly decrepit old because I was alive when Quincy was on. I was alive when the Odd Couple was on. So it just reminds me that I'll be dead before I get Merrily Roll Along from Richard Linklater.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I'll quickly add some things that I've been watching. I alluded to both of them earlier in this podcast where I caught up with anyone but you because I was away on vacation and it was a easy movie to put on. That was the Glenn Powell Sydney Sweeney movie that came out earlier this year. It was my first thing that I'd seen Sydney Sweeney in, and I was like, I still don't understand like the big hype. I mean, like,
I'm with you.
yeah, I mean, she's beautiful, sure, but I don't get where the acting hype comes from. But it's a fun movie in a case of it's just easy to watch. It has like one of those like famous karaoke things that Judd Apatow used to do in the 40-Year-Old Virgin and all those kind of early 2000s comedies where they find like this one song that kind of connects the movie and everybody starts singing it and you like, oh yeah, this is funny that they're doing it, and they kind of run it into the ground. Unsurprisingly, they allude to it a lot of times in the movie. It is kind of a sideways take of Much Ado About Nothing, the Shakespeare play. So the characters were kind of just seemingly quote lines from Shakespeare randomly, which works if you're in tune to what they're doing. But otherwise, it's like, why are they just randomly quoting Shakespeare? Um, but
You got Megalopolis, so you're going to be in trouble.
And then the other movie I caught up with more recently was Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, and yeah, I think like I enjoyed being back in that universe and seeing those characters again. I think some person reminded me it's like 100 times more nipple rubbing because like one of the villains likes to rub his nipples, and he's not in Fury Road too long because he dies pretty easily, but in this one he's just standing there rubbing his nipples. The Furiosa here is played by Anya Taylor-Joy, and she doesn't have much to say, but I think she was probably right for the part because of she's so expressive. Maybe George Miller, outside of just enjoying the star power that she would probably bring to the movie and allow Warner Brothers to sign off on him making it, she has the facial expression and eyes for kind of conveying a lot of these horrors that Furiosa has to deal with. But ultimately, the movie kind of belongs to Chris Hemsworth this time around, as opposed to playing the everyman hero Thor that he is probably most well known for now. He gets to play the villain of this piece, and he gets to snarl and laugh and cohort and make all the nonsense that he wants to, really playing up this character to the nines. And he easily has the most speaking roles in this movie. And if you want to see him in kind of like a different role for him, I think back to the movie that I didn't see, the Grand Time of the El Royale. Maybe he was a villain in that one, but he it plays a pretty compelling villain in Furiosa. And the other reason probably to see the movie is to see these cars that George Miller and crew continue to make. I really appreciated Chris Hemsworth's chariot, which has three
Oh
motorcycles
yeah, it was great.
that is carrying him around.
I if nothing else, George Miller knows how to stage an action scene where you know the geography of it and you know where everybody is and you can see everything. So even though I didn't particularly care for Furiosa, I must say that that he really knows how, that he's unparalleled in terms of being able to stage an action sequence that good and that exciting with all those crazy cars. And Chris Hemsworth, I said in my review that he's channeling Kenneth Branagh. He's doing chewing the scenery, and I called him Kenneth Branagh. He's Kenneth Branagh with muscles, aka Kenneth Branagh. That's pretty much what he's doing, and I think he kind of almost saves the movie for me because he's just so freaking out there, and it's almost like the John Travolta playing the Kardashian in not the Kardashian playing the lawyer in the OJ movie uh, Cuba Gooding. You're like, everyone is looking at John Travolta saying, "What the fuck is he doing?" And you can see the actors doing that with Furiosa as well, Chris Hemsworth. But I mean, he's the most memorable thing in the movie, and I love his Roman chariot of motorcycles instead of horses. George Miller can still come up with that, and that's I admire that. But yeah, as I said, I wasn't crazy about the movie.
All right. Um. Well, I think that does it for us on our Richard Linklater talk and everything today. Odie, I want to extend a big thank you to you, and thank you for coming on to the show and extending your almost encyclopedic knowledge of movies. Speaking with you is always a treat because it's like you know so much, and it's a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I look forward to maybe I can come on again and we can talk about something else.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And
Yeah,
Evan, thanks again as always, and for doing your homework and getting some Richard Linklater movies.
yeah, of course. This was fun, and thanks again, Odie, for coming on.
All right, well, that's it from us here. It's the Pictures. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.